The 3 words destroyed my family. Dad, you're homeless. My name is Josiah Johnson. While I was on a 2-week medical cruise, my daughter sold my house to pay her husband's gambling debts and pocketed $680,000. When I returned to find strangers living in my home, Rebecca actually laughed. You should thank us, Dad. We solved your money problems. Her husband Derek smirked and said I was dead weight, who should be grateful for their help. They had no idea what they'd just triggered. You see, while my daughter saw a broken-down widower surviving on Social Security, clipping coupons and driving a beat-up Honda, I was sitting on a $4.8 million secret that would destroy everything she thought she knew about her old man. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Because when you steal from family, sometimes the payback comes with federal prison time and a congregation full of witnesses. Let me tell you exactly how this happened. To understand what happened, you need to know how my daughter saw me. And I can't blame her entirely. For 3 years, since my wife Martha passed, I'd been living like I was broke. Not just careful with money, broke. Shopping with a calculator, clipping every coupon, buying the cheapest everything. My Social Security check was $847 a month. That's what Rebecca saw deposited into my checking account every month for 36 months straight. She'd drive up in her brand new BMW X5, $78,000, she made sure I knew, and find me washing my 2008 Honda Civic in the driveway. 180,000 miles on that car. Rust spots, torn seats, but it ran, and running was enough. Dad, this is embarrassing, she'd say. What will the neighbors think? I'd shrug. They'll think I'm practical. But it was more than that. After Martha died from that medical error at Mercy General, I just stopped caring about things. The wrongful death settlement came through in March 2021, $4.8 million. The lawyers called it substantial compensation for your loss. Money doesn't bring back your wife. So I left it sitting in the trust account at First National. Margaret Stone, my attorney, called every few months. Mr. Johnson, perhaps we should discuss investment options. I'd tell her the same thing. Not ready yet. Meanwhile, Rebecca watched me count out $15 for groceries. Watch me turn the thermostat down to 62 in winter. Watch me mend my own clothes instead of buying new ones. You're living like a pauper, she'd snap. It's pathetic. Her husband Derek was worse. He'd sit at my kitchen table, my table, and lecture me about facing reality. Look, old-timer, he'd say, playing with his $12,000 Rolex, you can't afford this house anymore. Property taxes alone are killing you. Derek ran some kind of consulting business that I never understood. Always flying somewhere, always talking about deals and opportunities, always asking if I needed help with my finances. What I didn't tell them was that Derek had problems. Big problems. The IRS was investigating him for tax evasion. $150,000 he'd hidden from Uncle Sam. He thought nobody knew, but when you're facing 3 years in federal prison, word gets around. Rebecca had no idea her husband was about to lose everything, but they both knew I was vulnerable. 69 years old, widower, barely scraping by. Every family gathering, they'd exchange those looks, the kind of looks that said, we need to do something about Dad. Last Christmas, Derek actually said it out loud. Josiah, you're becoming dead weight. Time to make some hard choices. Rebecca nodded along. My own daughter. I just stirred my coffee and stayed quiet. I'd learned something in my 69 years. Sometimes the best response is no response at all. Let people think what they want to think. But they mistook my silence for weakness. That was their first mistake. Their second mistake was assuming I'd stay quiet forever. The third mistake, the one that cost them everything, was what they did while I was on that medical cruise. My doctor had recommended it after some heart palpitations. 14 days in the Caribbean on the Celebrity Reflection. You need to reduce stress, Mr. Johnson. I left on January 5th. By the time I returned on January 20th, strangers were living in the house I'd owned for 32 years. Rebecca had moved fast. Listed it January 12th. Closed January 19th. $680,000. Boom. Done. And that's when she made the biggest mistake of all. She got greedy. The morning I came home, Rebecca was waiting in my driveway. Designer purse, fresh manicure, that BMW gleaming in the winter sun. She had paperwork. "Dad, we need to talk." She'd already been inside, changed the locks, put my belongings in storage. Everything I owned crammed into a 10 by 10 unit downtown. "I did what had to be done," she said, not even looking guilty. "You couldn't afford this place anymore." The paperwork was for Sunset Manor, a nursing home 40 minutes outside Toledo. $3,200 a month. Affordable senior living, the brochure called it. "You'll love it there," Rebecca said. "Activities, meal plans, people your own age." I looked at the photos. Shared rooms, plastic furniture, bingo on Tuesdays. "What if I don't want to go?" She laughed, actually laughed. "Dad, look around. You're homeless. I sold the house to help Derek with some business issues. This is your only option." Business issues. That's what she called her husband's tax evasion. "You have 30 days to get settled," she continued. "I've already paid the first month at Sunset Manor. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Harder than it needs to be. I asked to see the sale documents. She handed them over like she was doing me a favor. Everything looked legitimate, except for one thing. My signature on the deed transfer. I've been signing my name the same way for 50 years. Small J, big loop on the O in Johnson. The signature was close, but not quite right. The H was wrong. "Rebecca," I said quietly, "you forged my signature." Her face went red. "I did what I had to do. You weren't here. Derek needed that money immediately." "For what?" "That's none of your business." But I already knew. The IRS doesn't wait for convenient timing. When they want their money, they want it now. Derek had 30 days before they filed federal charges. Rebecca had helped him steal my house to buy his freedom. "You committed felony fraud to save your husband." "I saved our family," she shouted. "You should be thanking me." That night, I called Margaret Stone. "Mr. Johnson," she sounded surprised. "It's been months since we spoke." "Margaret, I need to ask you something. If someone forged my signature to sell my house, what kind of trouble would they be in?" Long pause. "Forgery, fraud, elder abuse, possibly federal charges depending on the amount. We're talking serious prison time. Why?" "Just curious." Another pause. "Mr. Johnson, has something happened? I'll call you back." But Rebecca wasn't done yet. 3 days later, she showed up with a U-Haul and 2 men I didn't recognize. "Time to go, Dad. I've loaded most of your stuff." She'd thrown everything into boxes. 40 years of marriage memorabilia, Martha's china, my Purple Heart, everything jumbled together like garbage. "Take what you need for Sunset Manor. The rest goes to Goodwill." And that's when I realized this wasn't just about money. This was about power. Rebecca wanted me gone. Out of sight, out of mind. Somewhere she could visit once a month and feel good about herself. "I'm not going to Sunset Manor." "Then where are you going to live? You're 70 years old with no money and no house. Face reality." I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. When had she become this person? When had she started seeing me as a burden instead of her father? "I'll figure something out." She shook her head like I was a child having a tantrum. "You have 1 week, Dad. Then I'm calling Adult Protective Services. They'll place you somewhere appropriate." Appropriate. Like I was a piece of furniture that needed to be stored. After they left, I sat in my empty house, their house now, and thought about my options. I could fight this quietly. Through lawyers and courts. Take months, maybe years. Or I could let Rebecca dig herself deeper. Sometimes the best way to catch a thief is to let them think they've gotten away with it. The call came from my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, 3 days after Rebecca's ultimatum. "Josiah, I'm so sorry about your troubles." "What troubles?" "Well, Rebecca was just here. She told me about your situation, how you lost the house and everything. She seemed very upset." "Lost the house, like it had been foreclosed or destroyed in a fire." "What exactly did she tell you?" "That you'd been struggling financially since Martha passed. That you'd fallen behind on everything. She said she tried to help, but—" Mrs. Patterson's voice trailed off. "But what?" "She said you were too proud to accept charity. And now you're—" well, she used the word homeless. Homeless. I thanked Mrs. Patterson and hung up. Then I drove to Rebecca's house. She lived in a Tudor-style mansion in the suburbs. 6 bedrooms, 3-car garage, swimming pool. Derek's consulting business had been very good to them. I rang the doorbell. Derek answered. Well, look what the cat dragged in. Shouldn't you be settling into your new place? I need to speak with Rebecca. She's busy. I could hear her in the background. Who is it? Your homeless father. She appeared behind Derek, wine glass in hand. Dad, what do you want? I want to understand why you told the neighbors I lost my house. You did lose it. You stole it. Derek stepped forward. Watch your mouth, old man. I ignored him. Rebecca, you forged my signature and sold my property without permission. That's federal fraud. She laughed. Who's going to believe you? You're a confused old man living on Social Security. The FBI will believe the handwriting analysis. Derek's face changed. What handwriting analysis? The one comparing my real signature to the forgery on the deed transfer. Rebecca's wine glass stopped halfway to her lips. You're bluffing. Am I? For just a second I saw doubt flicker across her face, but Derek stepped in. Listen carefully, you old fool. Rebecca saved your ass. That house was bleeding money. Property taxes, maintenance, utilities. You couldn't afford any of it. We did you a favor. By stealing $680,000. By solving a problem you were too stubborn to solve yourself. I looked at Derek's Rolex. How much did the IRS want? His face went white. That's right, I continued. I know about your tax problems. $150,000 in back taxes, facing federal charges. My house sale sure came at a convenient time. Rebecca set down her wine glass. How do you know about that? I know a lot of things. Derek grabbed my arm. You don't know anything. You're nobody. Just an old man with nothing. I looked down at his hand on my arm. Then I looked him in the eye. Let go of me. Something in my voice made him step back. Derek, I said calmly, you and my daughter committed felony fraud to solve your tax problem. You think I'm nobody because I drive an old car and clip coupons, but you don't know everything about me. Like what? Rebecca demanded. Like why I can afford to fight this properly. She rolled her eyes. With what money? Your Social Security check? I pulled out my phone and dialed a number. Margaret, it's Josiah Johnson. Yes, I'm ready to proceed. Yes, all of it. Tomorrow morning? Perfect. I hung up and looked at my daughter. That was my attorney. She's been waiting 3 years for this call. Derek scoffed. What attorney? You can't afford an attorney. Some people shouldn't be underestimated. Rebecca crossed her arms. Stop playing games, Dad. You're broke. We all know it. Do we? I turned to leave, then stopped. Rebecca, you have until tomorrow night to return my property and reverse the sale. After that, things get complicated. Or what? Derek shouted. What are you going to do? Sue us with your imaginary money? I didn't answer. Sometimes silence is more powerful than threats. As I walked to my car, Rebecca called after me. Dad, you're making a mistake. I was trying to help you. I got in my Honda and drove away. In the rearview mirror, I could see them standing in their doorway, arguing. That night, Margaret Stone called me back. Mr. Johnson, I've reviewed the documents you emailed. This is a clear case of fraud and elder abuse. We can file federal charges tomorrow. Not yet. Sir, give them one more day to make it worse. Margaret was quiet for a moment. You want them to dig themselves deeper. I want them to show their true character in public. What did you have in mind? I told her about the church fundraiser on Sunday. Rebecca had volunteered to speak about supporting family in crisis. She's going to use your situation to gain sympathy, Margaret said. Exactly. And when she does, we'll be ready. Saturday morning, Derek showed up at the storage unit where they'd dumped my belongings. I was going through boxes, looking for specific documents, when I heard his BMW pull up. Still playing pretend, old-timer? I didn't look up from the box of Martha's papers. What do you want, Derek? To give you some free advice. Drop this attorney nonsense. You're embarrassing yourself. I found what I was looking for, Martha's medical records from Mercy General, the whole file, everything that led to the malpractice settlement. These are interesting, I said, holding up the folder. Derek glanced at the papers. Medical bills? Dad, everybody knows you couldn't afford Martha's treatment. That's why you're broke now. Is that what Rebecca told you? It's what everyone knows. You went into debt trying to save your wife, and now you're bitter about it. I pulled out one specific document, the settlement agreement, but I kept it folded so Derek couldn't read it. You know what's funny? I said. People see what they want to see. Derek moved closer, trying to read over my shoulder. What's that supposed to mean? For 3 years, everyone's watched me live like I'm broke. Count pennies, clip coupons, drive that old Honda. Because you are broke. Or maybe I had a reason for living that way. I could see the confusion on Derek's face. He was smart enough to sense something was wrong, but not smart enough to figure out what. What reason? Instead of answering, I pulled out my phone and called a number. First National Bank Trust Department. Yes, this is Josiah Johnson. Account number 4421856. Upward. I need to schedule an appointment. Monday morning? Perfect. I hung up. Derek was staring at me. What account number? Just some old business I need to take care of. What kind of business? I started packing the documents back into their box. Derek, you've been married to my daughter for 8 years. In all that time, did you ever wonder why a janitor could afford to put his daughter through law school? Derek blinked. Rebecca went to community college. She went to Ohio State, full tuition, $43,000 a year. That's impossible. She said you could never afford. And then Georgetown for law school, another $60,000 a year. Derek's face was changing color. You're lying. Am I? I pulled out another document. Rebecca's graduation photo from Georgetown Law. She'd sent it to me with a thank you note. Dad, I couldn't have done this without you. Derek stared at the photo. She told me she got scholarships. Some people rewrite their own history. Just then, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Margaret Stone, attorney. Excuse me, I said to Derek. I need to take this. Josiah? Margaret's voice was loud enough for Derek to hear. I've been reviewing your trust account statements. Are you sure you want to liquidate the full amount for this case? The full amount, yes. That's a substantial sum to spend on litigation. Justice is worth the investment. Derek was listening to every word, his face getting paler by the minute. Should I prepare the check for Monday's meeting? Margaret continued. Have everything ready. And Margaret, make sure you bring the settlement documentation. All of it. The entire malpractice file. That's quite a stack of paperwork. The more documentation, the better. I hung up. Derek was standing there like he'd seen a ghost. What malpractice file? I closed the storage unit and walked toward my car. Derek, you're a businessman. You understand return on investment, right? He nodded numbly. Sometimes you invest money to make money. Sometimes you invest money to make a point. What point? I got in my Honda and rolled down the window. That some mistakes are too expensive to make. Mud. As I drove away, I could see Derek in my rearview mirror, standing in the parking lot, talking frantically on his phone. That evening, Rebecca called me. Dad, Derek said you were acting strange today, talking about trust accounts and attorneys. Did he mention the Georgetown conversation? Long silence. What Georgetown conversation? Ask him. Another pause. Dad, are you feeling okay? Since Mom died, you've been different. Sometimes older people get confused about money, about the past. I'm not confused, Rebecca. Then explain what you meant about affording law school. Instead of answering directly, I asked her a question. Do you remember your mother's last words? Dad, please don't. She said, take care of our daughter, but don't let her take advantage of you. What's that supposed to mean? I think you know. Rebecca's voice got sharper. I think you're having some kind of breakdown. Maybe Sunset Manor has a memory care unit. Maybe you should ask Derek about our conversation today. What conversation? He said you were rambling about bank accounts that don't exist. Do they? I hung up before she could answer. That night I called Margaret Stone again. Everything set for Monday? Absolutely. Mr. Johnson, are you sure about tomorrow's plan? Once Rebecca makes those statements publicly, there's no going back. That's the point. And you're comfortable with the congregation seeing the documentation? I thought about Martha, about Rebecca's ingratitude, about Derek's smugness. Some lessons need an audience. Sunday morning at Grace Baptist Church. I'd been attending for 15 years, ever since Martha and I moved to Toledo. Pastor Williams knew me as the quiet widower who sat in the back pew and put $5 in the collection plate. What he didn't know was that I'd been the church's largest anonymous donor for 3 years running. $125,000 total. Mortgage payments, youth programs, food bank, all donations made through Margaret Stone's office to keep my name off the records. Rebecca had volunteered to speak during the morning service about supporting family in crisis. She didn't know I'd be there. I sat in my usual spot, back row, wearing my cleanest shirt and tie. Around me, 85 church members settled into their pews. Mrs. Patterson waved from across the aisle. The Hendersons nodded hello. People who'd known Martha and me for years. Good people who believed Rebecca's story about my financial troubles. Pastor Williams introduced her with genuine warmth. Rebecca Johnson Miller has asked to share some thoughts about caring for our elderly family members during difficult times. Rebecca walked to the podium in a navy blue dress that probably cost more than I spent on groceries in 6 months. She looked confident, caring, responsible. She looked like the perfect daughter dealing with a difficult situation. Thank you, Pastor Williams. I wanted to talk today about sacrifice and family responsibility. Her voice carried beautifully through the sanctuary. She had always been a good speaker. 3 years ago, my mother passed away after a long illness. The medical bills were overwhelming. My father, Josiah, tried to handle everything alone, but the costs were too much. I watched the congregation nod sympathetically. Mrs. Patterson touched her chest, moved by Rebecca's apparent pain. Dad is a proud man. He worked as a janitor for 35 years, saved every penny. But sometimes life throws you more than you can handle. More nods. These were working people. They understood unexpected medical bills. Last month, Dad's situation became critical. He couldn't afford his house payments anymore. The property taxes alone were eating his Social Security check. Rebecca paused for effect, dabbed her eyes with a tissue. As his daughter, I had to make some hard choices. I sold his house to keep him from foreclosure. It broke my heart, but it was the right thing to do. Mrs. Patterson was wiping her own eyes now. The Hendersons were shaking their heads, sadly. Now Dad is staying at a wonderful assisted living facility where he gets the care and support he needs. But the transition has been difficult. He's struggling with the loss of independence. Sometimes he says things that aren't quite accurate. About money, about the past. Rebecca looked directly at me. She'd spotted me in the back row. It's heartbreaking to watch your parent become confused about their finances. Sometimes he thinks he has resources that don't exist. It's part of the grief process, the doctors say. Murmurs of understanding rippled through the congregation. I'm sharing this because many of you are facing similar situations with your own parents. It's not easy to step in when someone you love is making poor financial decisions. But sometimes love means making unpopular choices. She was good, very good, painting herself as the suffering daughter, me as the confused old man. I've been covering Dad's assisted living costs myself. It's a strain on our family budget, but we're managing. Derek and I believe in taking care of family. Pastor Williams nodded approvingly. This was exactly the kind of family devotion he preached about. But here's what I've learned. We can't do this alone. Community support matters. If you have elderly parents or neighbors struggling with finances, reach out. Offer help. Sometimes pride prevents people from accepting assistance, but we have to keep trying. Rebecca's voice grew stronger, more passionate. My father may not understand why I had to sell his house, but someday he'll see that I was trying to protect him from poverty, from homelessness, from the dignity of living in a house he couldn't afford. The congregation was completely with her. I could see it in their faces. They saw a devoted daughter making painful sacrifices for an ungrateful, confused father. I'm asking for your prayers during this difficult time, for Dad's health and peace of mind, for families everywhere dealing with these challenges, and for wisdom to know when love requires tough decisions. She stepped back from the podium to scattered applause. Pastor Williams took her hand. Thank you, Rebecca, for sharing something so personal. I know I speak for everyone when I say we're praying for your family. That's when I stood up. Every head in the sanctuary turned toward me. Rebecca's face went white. I walked slowly down the center aisle, my footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. Pastor Williams, I said when I reached the front, I'd like to respond to my daughter's presentation. Of course, Josiah, the floor is yours. I turned to face the congregation, 85 faces looking at me with sympathy, confusion, and growing curiosity. Rebecca told you I'm confused about money, that I think I have resources that don't exist. Rebecca started to speak, but I held up my hand. She told you about my financial struggles, about the house I couldn't afford, about the assisted living facility she's paying for. I pulled out my phone and dialed a familiar number. Margaret? Yes, it's Josiah. Are you still in the parking lot? Perfect. Could you join us inside? Bring everything. I hung up and looked at my daughter. Rebecca, you've told these good people a story. Now let me tell them the truth. The sanctuary doors opened. Margaret Stone walked in carrying a mahogany briefcase and a manila folder 4 inches thick. She walked to the front of the church and stood beside me. Congregation, I said, I'd like you to meet Margaret Stone. She's been my attorney for 3 years. Rebecca's knees actually buckled. She grabbed the podium for support. Margaret has some documents I think you should see. Margaret opened her briefcase and pulled out a bank statement. She handed it to Pastor Williams. This is Mr. Johnson's current account balance at First National Bank. Pastor Williams looked at the statement. His eyes widened. His mouth fell open. 4 million, he whispered. The congregation stirred, people leaning forward, straining to hear. $4.8 million, I said clearly. The settlement from my wife's wrongful death case. Complete silence. For 3 years, I've been your largest anonymous donor. The mortgage payments you thought came from the denominational office? That was me. The youth camp scholarships? Me. The food bank renovations? Also me. Mrs. Patterson gasped. The Hendersons sat frozen in their pew. I looked at Rebecca, who was now gripping the podium like her life depended on it. My daughter didn't save me from poverty. She stole my house while I was on vacation and called me homeless. And that's when Margaret Stone opened that 4-inch folder and everything changed. Margaret Stone placed the thick folder on the church lectern with a soft thud that seemed to echo through the silent sanctuary. Pastor Williams, congregation members, she said in her clear attorney voice, my name is Margaret Stone of Stone & Associates. I've represented Mr. Johnson since his wife's wrongful death case was settled in March 2021. She opened the folder and pulled out the first document. This is the settlement agreement between Josiah Johnson and Mercy General Hospital. Due to gross medical negligence that resulted in Martha Johnson's death, the hospital agreed to pay $4,847,000 in damages. Gasps rippled through the sanctuary. Mrs. Patterson clutched her chest. The Hendersons sat frozen, staring. Rebecca made a strangled sound and started to speak, but Margaret continued. Mr. Johnson chose to leave this money untouched for 3 years while he grieved. During that time, he maintained his modest lifestyle and made anonymous donations to this church totaling $125,000. Pastor Williams looked down at the bank statement again, then at me, then back at the statement. The mortgage payments that saved this building in 2022, Margaret said. Mr. Johnson, the new church van, Mr. Johnson, the food bank expansion that feeds 300 families monthly, also Mr. Johnson. The silence was so complete I could hear the heating system cycling on. Margaret pulled out another set of documents. Now, here's what happened while Mr. Johnson was on his doctor-recommended medical cruise in January. She placed a legal document on the lectern. This is the deed transfer from Mr. Johnson's property. Notice the signature here. She pointed with her pen. And here, she continued, pulling out another paper, is Mr. Johnson's genuine signature from the hospital settlement. Even from the back of the church, the difference was obvious. The forged signature was close, but the H in Johnson was clearly wrong. Rebecca Johnson Miller and her husband Derek, forged Mr. Johnson's signature to sell his home for $680,000 while he was unable to object. Rebecca finally found her voice. I didn't. Dad was going to lose the house anyway. Mrs. Miller, Margaret said calmly, your father owns his home outright. No mortgage, property taxes current through 2025. He was in no danger of foreclosure. She pulled out more papers. Furthermore, this is documentation of your husband's tax evasion case. Federal docket number CR 2024-0156. Mr. Miller owes the IRS $150,247 and faces 3 years in federal prison. Derek, who had been sitting in the third row, suddenly stood up. His face was bright red. This is a private family matter. Margaret ignored him and continued. The timing of the house sale corresponds exactly with Mr. Miller's IRS payment deadline. This was not about helping Mr. Johnson. This was about stealing his assets to pay for Mr. Miller's tax evasion. Pastor Williams set down the bank statement with shaking hands. Josiah, is this all true? I nodded. Every word. He looked at Rebecca, who was now openly crying. Rebecca, did you really forge your father's signature? He wasn't here, she sobbed. Derek needed the money immediately or they were going to arrest him. I thought Dad would understand. You thought I'd understand theft? I said quietly. The congregation was murmuring now, angry whispers, shocked faces turning back and forth between Rebecca and me. Mrs. Patterson stood up in her pew. Rebecca, how could you? Your father has been nothing but generous to this community. You don't understand, Rebecca cried. He was living like he was broke, shopping with coupons, driving that old car. How was I supposed to know he had money? Did you ask him? Called out Tom Henderson from the fifth row. He never said anything. Because it wasn't your business, I said. Margaret pulled out one more document. This is particularly relevant to today's situation. Mr. Johnson recorded several conversations with his daughter and son-in-law in the days following the house sale. She pressed play on a small digital recorder. Derek's voice filled the church. Listen carefully, you old fool. Rebecca saved your ass. That house was bleeding money. We did you a favor. Then Rebecca's voice. Dad, you're homeless now. I sold the house to help Derek with some business issues. This is your only option. And Derek again. You're nobody. Just an old man with nothing. The recorder fell silent. The entire congregation stared at Rebecca and Derek in horror. These recordings, Margaret said, constitute clear evidence of elder abuse, fraud, and financial exploitation. Pastor Williams stepped forward. His face was pale, but his voice was steady. Rebecca, Derek, I think you should leave. Pastor, please, Rebecca begged. You don't understand the whole situation. I understand enough. You stole from your father, and then came here to lie about it. The congregation was stirring restlessly now. People were standing up, shaking their heads, muttering angrily. Mrs. Patterson was crying. Tom Henderson was red-faced with fury. Get out! Someone called from the back. How could you do that to your own father? Shouted another voice. Derek grabbed Rebecca's arm. We're leaving. But as they reached the center aisle, Rebecca turned back to me. Dad, please. I made a mistake, but I'm still your daughter. I looked at her for a long moment. This woman who had raised from a little girl who used to fall asleep in my lap during church services. Rebecca, I said sadly, you stopped being my daughter the moment you called me homeless. Derek pulled her toward the exit, but she broke away and ran back to me. The money doesn't matter, she sobbed. You're my father. I love you. If you loved me, I said quietly, you would never have stolen from me. Margaret Stone closed her briefcase with a sharp click. Mr. Johnson, should we proceed with federal charges tomorrow? The entire congregation held its breath. I looked at Rebecca one more time. At this woman who had taken my kindness for weakness, my grief for confusion, my modesty for poverty. Yes, I said, proceed with all charges. Rebecca collapsed into Derek's arms, sobbing. He half carried her toward the door. Just before they reached the exit, Derek turned back and shouted, You'll never see your grandchildren again. I felt something break inside my chest, but I kept my voice steady. Some prices are worth paying. The church doors slammed shut behind them. Pastor Williams cleared his throat. Perhaps we should pray. But before anyone could bow their heads, Margaret Stone spoke again. There's one more thing the congregation should know. She pulled out a final document. Mr. Johnson has instructed me to establish a permanent endowment fund for Grace Baptist Church. The principal amount will be $1 million. Absolute silence. This gift comes with one condition, that it be used to help families in genuine financial crisis. Mr. Johnson wants to ensure that real need is never confused with greed. Pastor Williams sat down heavily in the front pew. Mrs. Patterson began to cry again, but this time from relief and gratitude, and for the first time in 3 years, I felt something like peace. Monday morning, Margaret Stone and I walked into the FBI field office in downtown Toledo. She carried that same mahogany briefcase, now supplemented with 2 banker's boxes of evidence. Agent Sarah Collins had been expecting us. She'd spent the weekend reviewing the preliminary materials Margaret had sent over. Mr. Johnson, Agent Collins said, shaking my hand, I've seen a lot of elder abuse cases, but this one's particularly egregious. Your daughter and son-in-law made several critical mistakes. She led us to a conference room where the evidence was spread across a long table. First mistake, they documented everything. Text messages, emails, bank transfers. It's like they wanted to get caught. She showed us Derek's phone records, dozens of calls to tax attorneys, frantic searches for emergency money loans and property liquidation services. Second mistake, they involved multiple federal crimes, forgery, fraud, money laundering, and Derek's original tax evasion. This isn't going to be handled at the state level. Margaret opened her briefcase and added our recordings to the evidence pile. The audio recordings seal it, Agent Collins continued. Clear admissions of guilt. Derek explicitly saying they did me a favor by stealing my house. Rebecca admitting she forged my signature because Derek needed the money immediately. I watched Agent Collins organize the evidence into neat stacks. This wasn't emotional for her, it was just another case. That made it somehow more satisfying. What happens next? I asked. We execute search warrants this afternoon, seize their financial records, computers, phones, build the complete picture of their finances and communications. Margaret leaned forward. How long before charges are filed? Grand jury meets Thursday. I expect full indictments by Friday. Agent Collins pulled out a thick folder. Mr. Johnson, I need you to understand what you're setting in motion. Rebecca faces 5 to 10 years federal prison time. Derek's looking at 15 years minimum between the tax evasion and the new charges. I thought about my grandchildren. Rebecca's 2 kids, ages 8 and 12. They'd grow up with their parents in prison. Agent Collins, what if they agree to make full restitution? Doesn't change the federal charges, but it might influence sentencing. Margaret touched my arm. Josiah, are you having second thoughts? I shook my head. I'm thinking about consequences. For everyone. Agent Collins studied me carefully. Mr. Johnson, in my experience, people who commit these crimes don't stop until they're forced to stop. Your daughter will find other victims if she faces no consequences. That afternoon, I watched from Margaret's office window as FBI agents served search warrants at Rebecca's house. Neighbors gathered on the sidewalk. Children pointed at the official vehicles. Derek tried to run. Actually tried to run when they knocked on the door. The agents tackled him in his own front yard, in front of the Hendersons and Mrs. Patterson and everyone else in the neighborhood. Rebecca came out quietly, hands behind her back, crying. By evening, it was all over local news. Local couple arrested in elder abuse scheme. Rebecca's real estate license photo was splashed across every channel. Tuesday morning, Derek's consulting business collapsed. His clients saw the news and canceled every contract. His office landlord changed the locks. Wednesday, Rebecca lost her real estate license pending investigation. The state board acted swiftly on fraud charges. Thursday, the grand jury returned indictments on all charges. 15 counts total between the two of them. Friday morning, Derek accepted a plea bargain, 12 years federal prison in exchange for testimony against Rebecca and full cooperation with tax investigations. He threw my daughter under the bus to save himself 3 years. Rebecca's attorney called Margaret that afternoon. My client wants to discuss a settlement. Margaret and I met with Rebecca and her lawyer at Margaret's office. Rebecca looked like she'd aged 10 years in 1 week. Dark circles under her eyes, hands shaking. "Dad," she said when I walked in, "I never meant for it to go this far." I sat down across from her. "What did you mean, Rebecca?" I thought you'd be okay with it eventually, when you saw that we'd solved Derek's problem. By committing felony fraud." Her lawyer cleared his throat. "Mr. Johnson, my client is prepared to offer full restitution plus damages. We're talking about returning the house, paying your legal fees, and additional compensation for your suffering." "How much additional compensation?" $200,000. I looked at Rebecca. "Where would you get $200,000? Derek's business is gone. Your real estate license is revoked." She started crying again. "I'll figure it out. Get a loan, sell the BMW, whatever it takes." Margaret leaned forward. "Mrs. Miller, you're facing 8 federal charges. Even with a plea bargain, you're looking at minimum 5 years prison time. Restitution doesn't eliminate criminal liability." Rebecca's lawyer tried again. "Mr. Johnson, surely family forgiveness." I held up my hand. "Let me ask you something, Rebecca. If I forgive you today, if I drop all charges and let you walk away, what lesson do you learn?" She wiped her eyes. "That family forgives each other, or that stealing from family has no consequences." Her lawyer jumped in. "Mr. Johnson, consider your grandchildren. They need their mother." That hit hard, but I thought about Agent Collins's words. People who commit these crimes don't stop until they're forced to stop. My grandchildren need to learn that actions have consequences, that you don't steal from people who love you. I stood up. "Margaret, proceed with the federal prosecution." Rebecca broke down completely. "Dad, please, I'll do anything." I paused at the door. "Rebecca, you had your chance to do the right thing. You chose to double down and lie to our church family instead." Her lawyer made one last attempt. "Mr. Johnson, this will destroy her life." "No," I said quietly. "Her choices destroyed her life. I'm just making sure she pays for them." That night, Margaret called with the final plea negotiation results. Rebecca rejected the federal prosecutor's offer. She's going to trial. What was the offer? 7 years federal prison, 5 years supervised release, full restitution plus penalties. I sat in my motel room. I was still technically homeless, and thought about my daughter choosing 7 more years in prison rather than accepting responsibility for her crimes. Some people never learn. 6 months later, I sat in Federal Courtroom 4B as Judge Patricia Morrison read Rebecca's sentence. "Mrs. Miller, you have been found guilty on all 8 federal charges: elder abuse, wire fraud, bank fraud, forgery, conspiracy, and money laundering. These crimes represent a profound betrayal of trust against your own father." Rebecca stood between her 2 public defenders. She'd run out of money for private counsel after the first month. The Tudor-style house was gone. The BMW was gone. Everything was gone. The court finds your actions particularly heinous because they targeted a vulnerable elderly person who had already suffered the loss of his spouse. Your victim impact statement, Mr. Johnson, was quite moving. Judge Morrison looked at me in the gallery. I nodded respectfully. Furthermore, your decision to publicly humiliate your father in a church setting demonstrates a callousness that troubles this court deeply. Rebecca's shoulders shook. She hadn't looked at me once during the entire trial. However, the court also considers your lack of prior criminal history and your eventual guilty plea. Her lawyer had finally convinced her to plea bargain after Derek's testimony destroyed any chance of acquittal. "Mrs. Miller, you are sentenced to 9 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years supervised release. You will pay full restitution of $680,000, plus court costs and penalties totaling $112,000. 9 years. Rebecca would be 54 when she got out. Additionally, you're permanently barred from any position involving financial responsibility for elderly individuals, and you will complete 200 hours of community service upon release." Judge Morrison banged her gavel. Court dismissed. As the bailiffs led Rebecca away in handcuffs, she finally looked at me. Her eyes held no anger anymore, just exhaustion. I felt no satisfaction, just sadness for what she'd chosen to become. Outside the courthouse, Margaret and I walked in silence for several blocks. How do you feel? She asked. I buried my daughter today. Josiah, you didn't do this to her. She did it to herself. I knew Margaret was right, but knowing and feeling are different things. The consequences had rippled out far beyond Rebecca and Derek. Their children, my grandchildren, were living with Derek's sister in Michigan. Rebecca's parental rights had been suspended pending the outcome of child welfare evaluations. 8-year-old Emma and 12-year-old Michael had to change schools, leave their friends, start over with relatives they barely knew. Emma cried every night, asking when Mommy was coming home. Michael had stopped talking altogether. Derek's sister, Linda, called me occasionally with updates. She was a good woman, a nurse, doing her best with 2 traumatized children, but she was also struggling financially with 2 extra mouths to feed. I'd started sending monthly support payments, $5,000 a month for the children's expenses. Linda didn't know where the money came from. I'd arranged it through Margaret's office, but it kept them in decent schools and counseling. The community consequences were equally severe. Grace Baptist Church had become famous, but not in a good way. The story had gone national. Daughter steals house, lies to congregation, father reveals multi-million-dollar secret. News vans parked outside the church for weeks. Reporters ambushed congregation members in the parking lot. Pastor Williams handled it with grace, but the constant attention was wearing on everyone. Some members left, embarrassed by the association. Others stayed, but asked uncomfortable questions about the church's financial oversight. How had they not known about the anonymous donations? What other secrets might be hiding in the congregation? Mrs. Patterson stopped attending entirely. Too much drama, she had told me when I called to check on her. The neighborhood where I'd lived for 32 years was equally affected. My old house sat empty while legal proceedings determined its ownership. The new buyers, an innocent young couple with a toddler, were trapped in a legal nightmare. Their earnest money was tied up in federal court. Their dream home had become a crime scene. They'd had to move in with her parents while lawyers sorted out the mess. Property values on my street dropped 15%. No one wanted to buy near the house from the news. Derek's consulting business hadn't just collapsed. It had taken several small businesses down with it. Companies that had relied on his services were left scrambling. 2 of his clients filed bankruptcy after losing crucial contracts. The IRS investigation had expanded beyond Derek to examine his entire professional network. 3 other business owners were now under federal investigation for tax evasion schemes. Rebecca's real estate colleagues faced scrutiny as well. The state licensing board was reviewing every transaction she had handled in the past 5 years. 2 deals were found to have irregularities. Her former clients sued her brokerage. The firm paid out $800,000 in settlements and fired 3 other agents associated with Rebecca's practices. But the most painful consequence was the silence. 9 months had passed since the church incident. In all that time, Rebecca had written me exactly 1 letter from federal prison. Dad, I know you'll never forgive me, but I want you to know I understand why you did this. I became someone I don't recognize. I hurt the person who loved me most. I'm sorry isn't enough, but it's all I have. Please take care of Emma and Michael. They're the only good things I ever created. I'd read that letter 50 times. I kept it in my wallet, next to Martha's last photo. Derek had written nothing. According to his sister, he spent his time in prison writing angry letters to various lawyers, still trying to find someone else to blame for his situation. Some people never learn. I'd moved into a modest apartment near downtown Toledo. 2 bedrooms, nothing fancy. I'd furnished it simply. Martha's favorite chair, our wedding photo, a few books. The majority of my settlement money remained untouched. Margaret had invested it conservatively. It was earning more in interest than I could spend in several lifetimes, but the money felt different now, heavier, connected to so much pain. Every month I wrote checks, $5,000 to Linda for the children, $25,000 to Grace Baptist Church, $10,000 to various charities. Giving it away felt better than keeping it. Some evenings I'd drive past my old house. It looked smaller than I remembered, sadder. The garden Martha had loved was overgrown. The mailbox was dented. Paint was peeling on the front porch. I'd sit in my Honda and remember better times. Rebecca as a little girl helping Martha plant flowers. Family barbecues in the backyard. Christmas mornings when the house felt full of love and possibility. Those memories belonged to different people. People who no longer existed. The house was just a house now. The family was just a legal case file. But consequences, I'd learned, don't care about nostalgia. They just are. 2 years after the sentencing, I received an unexpected visitor. Linda knocked on my apartment door on a cold Tuesday evening in March. With her was Michael, now 14, taller than I remembered, with his mother's eyes and his grandfather's stubborn chin. "Mr. Johnson," Linda said nervously, "Michael has been asking to see you for months. I finally decided it was time." Michael stood behind his aunt, hands shoved deep in his pockets, looking anywhere but at me. "Come in," I said. "Please." They sat on my small couch while I made coffee. The apartment was quiet, except for the radiator humming and the distant sound of traffic. "How's Emma?" I asked. "She's doing better," Linda replied. "Still asks about her mom, but she's made friends at school. She's in counseling twice a week." "And Michael?" Linda glanced at her nephew. "He has something he wants to ask you." Michael finally looked at me directly. "Did you really have to send Mom to prison?" The question hung in the air like smoke. I'd been dreading it for 2 years. "Michael," I said carefully, "what did your mother tell you about what happened?" He shrugged. "That you got mad about the house and called the police on her." "Is that all she said?" Another shrug. "That sometimes adults disagree about money." I looked at Linda, who nodded slightly. Rebecca had minimized everything to protect her children's image of her. "Michael, your mother stole $680,000 from me. She forged my signature and lied to our entire church community about it." His face reddened. "You didn't need that money. You were living like you were poor anyway." There it was, Rebecca's logic, passed down to the next generation. "Michael," I said gently, "if someone took your bicycle without asking and sold it, would that be stealing?" "That's different." "How? A bicycle isn't worth $600,000. "So stealing is okay if you think the victim can afford it?" He fidgeted with his sleeve. "I don't know." Linda leaned forward. "Michael, tell your grandfather the real reason you wanted to come here." He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I wanted to ask if you'd pay for Mom's appeal lawyer." My heart sank. "Michael, your mother already had an appeal. It was denied. But there might be other lawyers, better ones." I sat down across from him. This boy who looked so much like Rebecca at that age, full of certainty and misplaced loyalty. "Michael, what if I told you I'd pay for the best appeal lawyer in the country, and he managed to get your mother out of prison tomorrow? What then?" His face lit up. "Then we could be a family again." "And what about the people she hurt? What about the lesson you'd learn from watching her escape consequences?" The light faded from his eyes. "I don't care about lessons. I just want my mom back." I understood. Of course he did. But wanting something doesn't make it right. "Michael, I'm going to tell you something that might be hard to hear. Your mother made choices, bad choices. She could have asked me for help with Derek's problems. She could have told me the truth about their financial situation. Instead, she chose to steal from me and lie about it. You could have forgiven her." I could have, but then what would that teach her? What would it teach you and Emma about accountability? He was crying now, angry tears. "It would teach us that families stick together." Linda put her arm around him. "Michael, no!" He stood up abruptly. "He's not family. Real grandfathers don't send their daughters to prison." The words hit like physical blows, but I kept my voice steady. "Michael, I loved your mother from the day she was born until the day she stole from me. But love without boundaries isn't love. It's enabling." "I don't know what that means." It means that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let someone face the consequences of their actions. He wiped his nose with his sleeve. She's my mom. And she'll always be your mom. Prison doesn't change that, but it also doesn't change what she did. Linda stood up. We should go. This was too much to ask, but I motioned for them to sit back down. Michael, I want to make you an offer. He looked at me suspiciously. I can't get your mother out of prison, but I can promise you something else. When you turn 18, if you've graduated high school with good grades and stayed out of trouble, I'll pay for your college education, full tuition, room and board, wherever you want to go. What about Emma? Same offer for Emma when she turns 18. Michael's tears had stopped. Why would you do that? Because you're my grandchildren, because you didn't choose any of this, and because education gives you choices your parents didn't think they had. Linda squeezed Michael's shoulder. What do you say? He was quiet for a long time. Then, what if I don't want to go to college? Then the money goes to charity. Your choice. What if I want to study law and become Mom's lawyer? I smiled despite myself. Then you'll be a very well-educated lawyer. As they prepared to leave, Michael turned back to me. Grandpa, do you ever miss her? Every day. But you still won't help her get out? No, Michael, I won't. And he nodded slowly, like he was starting to understand something he didn't want to understand. Will you write to me sometimes? About college stuff? If you want me to. After they left, I sat in Martha's old chair and thought about boundaries. Some fences keep good things in, some fences keep bad things out. The best fences do both.